Welcome to the Epic Success Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Shannon Irvine. Okay, I have been waiting for 3 months to be able to bring this series to you. I am excited like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. So, what is this? I have spoken to some of the industry leading neurologists, brain scientists, breath scientists, people who are really on the cutting edge of investigating, researching how the brain works in terms of high performance, in terms of success, in terms of optimizing the experience that we have here on this earth, creating an environment in which our brain will help us level up, help us succeed, help us truly become the biggest and best version of ourselves. This is something that over the next few weeks is so powerful that I hope you don't miss a single episode, because these experts are going to show you how the brain works, how the brain wires success, how the brain can re-automate broken patterns, how we can use some of the systems of our brain to truly level up, all the things that are deeply ingrained in the work that I do with the success switch method and flipping on your brain success switch. These are colleagues of mine, people I have done some research with, people that have been an integral part of their own field and their own slice in the brain science world. And I am bringing them to you as an entrepreneur, as a high performer, as somebody who really wants to be in that next level version of themselves, to start to see the power that is available to you when you flip your brain success switch on. Now, I know I talk a lot about the success switch method, this system in which I teach my clients the step-by-step process to removing the blocks that are holding you back and to truly building a pathway in your brain for the success that you want. Today, I'm bringing to you Dr. Bagnell. Now, some of the research that Dr. Bagnell has done in measuring brain and different brainwave technologies, and how he is working with autistic children and children that have challenges with brain function and actually increasing brain function, massive deep in neuroplasticity. And he does some very, very creative sonar work that allows for brainwave normalization. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to me, this is super important, because a lot of the times we live outside of the brainwave state that actually creates focus and actually creates that deep thinking that is required to get to the next level. And some of the work that Dr. Bagnell is going to talk about today allows us to learn the differences and learn the steps to start creating practices around using brainwaves to actually further our success. So this series, the brain science behind successful people, is going to be over the next, I believe it's 6 weeks. We have some amazing guests, and I cannot wait till you hear this interview with Dr. Bagnell. I cannot wait to hear how you're going to apply what you learned today. Let's geek out together. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's actually use the God-given gift of your brain and the way it is optimally working, and make sure that it is, so that you can optimally hardwire your success. All right, here we go. Let's talk more about your work. We were just having the discussion about the hardware versus the software, and I love that analogy. Dr. Bagnell works more on the hardware and what is happening in the brain in that sense in terms of optimization. So I'd love for you to share with my listeners what it is that you get to do, and what it is, the transformations you're creating for people from a brain-based perspective.
Yeah, certainly honored though to be here with you. You know, we have East Coast and West Coast represented, but really working on the individual and our ability to expand our bandwidth, let's say it that way. And the way we do that is we have to start out. I was thinking about this morning. I'm cleaning my pool this morning, and I'm thinking about our podcast today. And I was thinking, why is it so important to understand about our brain health? Because everything we do, and I'll kind of quote Dr. Amen, right? Everything we do, every decision we make, every choice of food we're going to put in our mouth is coming from this brain that we have in our head, this small group of matter, but billions of cells. And it's working in a way that's helping us choose our life.
Yeah.
Let's say it like that. To choose what we want. Sometimes we don't think we have a choice, but oftentimes we do have a way to choose to think about things. And I'll leave that really to you, because I feel like your expertise is in that software. What is the programming going on in the brain? But for us, we want to look at how is the brain working. So my thought this morning, just to shift back, was I'm cleaning the pool and I'm thinking, this is why it's important to analyze where your brain is at a certain time. Because if you don't know how it's functioning, how are you going to know how much better you're going to make it? Right? So the reason we do a brain evaluation, and really, I believe it's out of your side of the country, Dr. Bredesen at UCLA says, the day is coming when people will have a cognoscopy every year.
Yes.
I like that. Cognoscopy, analyzing your brain. You say, well, how do I do that? Because I know all these apps I can use for my brain, and I can do these biohacking things, but how do you analyze it? So there's different steps that we use to analyze the brain. One of those would be a brain map. We put a cap on somebody. We would put electrical connections to that. We'd measure the electrical activity of their brain. And then we would record that and measure it against or check it against a normative database. So here's a normal database. Here's your brain waves. How are they comparing it within a range, right? So that's one way. Then another thing we can do is visual tracking. So people will say, the eyes are the window to the soul. And I say, you're right. It's actually the window to the brain, because we know, the retina in the back of the eye is actually the only place we can see brain tissue outside the body. It's an outgrowth. But when the eyes move and they track in different ways, it tells us about different brain networks that are controlling that. So they're using eye movements to study Parkinson's, autism, Huntington's disease, concussion, and multiple sclerosis. So using eye movements to understand brain function is really a gold standard. So we have brain maps, eye movements. How about balance testing on a platform that tells us how much you sway with your eyes open and closed, what direction you sway. So, well, what good is that? My balance is perfect. I say, but we measure it against a normative database. Because balance is one of the other gold standards or litmus tests for healthy brain function, balance and gait movement. So there's just 3 tests, and we have a whole battery of other things we might do, like neuropsychological tests that are gamified on the computer, where we could send a person an email to test memory, attention, concentration, and verbal ability in a gamified test, not 6 hours of bogging you down. And it's just brilliant. Again, measuring against normative database. So when I get all that data from somebody, I can look at them and say, okay, you're scoring in the 72nd percentile in eye tracking. You're scoring in the 45th percentile in verbal ability. And if you're an entrepreneur, and you and I are, as doctors, physicians, we're entrepreneurs. You better hope that your verbal abilities are higher than 45%.
Oh, I hope so.
So we can measure those things, and then we can chart a course. How do we start to upgrade? I like that word, upgrade these processes, make that hardware more resilient so that the software can run more efficiently, right? I get a new computer in the office. It's beautiful. It's moving quickly. But our older computers are kind of like slow. They're kind of chunky the way they're moving. So we want to upgrade that brain. And one of those great ways is the camps that we do.
I can't wait to dive into that. And this should be speaking my listeners' love language, because we talk about a lot, like what you measure grows and what you don't measure does not grow. And that is true of your business, but how much more true is that of your mind, of your brain that controls everything? Like you can get more money, you can get more time, you can create, your brain is the only thing that can create those things. So we're out here spinning outside of ourselves trying to create all this action and movement, but the 3-pound superpower on the top of your head actually is the creation element of all of that. And one of Dr. Bagnell's
research methodologies is something that piqued my interest in the last couple of years. And I've been following him like every little camp that he does. And I have seen such amazing transformations. And my listeners who know me well, I live here on the West Coast. I live in San Diego, close to the beach. I'm at the beach every single day. And why that is, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to like show you my tattoo on the bottom of my leg, but it has dolphins tattooed on the bottom of my leg. And so I always had this interesting connection with dolphins. And some people are like, is it a woo thing? To me, it's a very scientific thing. And I've never been able to necessarily explain that per se, but I just know there's like a wisdom or a knowing or just a leveling of their brain patterns. And it's just been gorgeous to watch over the years. I'm a person of faith, so I always have those moments where I'm struggling. Dolphins always appear in the ocean right in front of me. It's like clockwork. It's crazy. So that being aside, putting more of my scientific hat back on, watching what you've done with some of the populations that's needed your impact the most has been nothing short of, in my mind, just game-changing, groundbreaking research. So I would love for you to share, what is the Dolphin Camp? Who are you seeing there, and what kind of changes you're seeing? And the great news is Dr. Bagnell and I are talking about me coming out and actually going through this experience myself. And so I cannot wait to share that. And I will share that entire journey with my listeners when I come. But I'd love for you to share this. How did this even start with you? Like, what got you even thinking this way, and what's happened since?
So the backstory is we've had a wonderful husband and wife that have been clients of ours, patients, over the past 15 years. For various and sundry conditions and functional medicine, physical medicine, and other things. And then we started getting into more of our functional neurology. And so when we started having discussions about that and they became more acquainted with what we were doing in the office, they are actually in ownership with a group around the world that owns dolphin habitats. Very humanely kept. I know some people have concerns about that, but these are not like the circuses of old or zoos of yesteryear. These places are, the highest priority there is those dolphins' well-being. And the marine mammal specialists that work with them in all the different places, Mexico, the Florida Keys, Pensacola, Florida, around the world, Italy, we have a number of locations. We had this discussion about that, and they said, would you be open to that? Because we have had some groups come down for a group experience. And I said, well, let me think about that. And my wife and I discussed that very much. And I talked to some colleagues in neuroscience, as you are. And we came up with the thought that this might be a very good marriage between land-based brain training that we do and water-based training. And you say, okay, because there is a large body of work with animal-assisted therapy. With dogs, with horses, equine, and dogs. And it's been very helpful, successful for people dealing with many conditions like PTSD, depression, anxiety, autism, OCD, more what we would consider more psychological or affect disorders, as you know. So with this discussion, what came out of it was I went down there numerous times on an order of maybe 10 trips down to the Keys to get in the water with the specialist, find out what kind of activities we could do, and then build out activities in the water that would have an enhancing effect on brain health. So one of those activities, which I sent you some early footage of this last year, is a dolphin floating meditation. So the client floats in the water, and the dolphin will be echolocating as the marine mammal specialist brings them around the client's head, back, neck, different areas. And dolphins will echolocate on their own, right? As soon as something is in their environment in the water, we operate mostly by our vision. Your ears will be operating mostly by their hearing. But the dolphins are mostly operating not by their vision, but by the echolocation, finding out what's in the environment, what's going on with that. And that echolocation goes into ranges that we can't sense. But it has a profound effect, we believe, on the human physiology. And I say we, I'm adding myself into the broader base of researchers working with these marine mammals, because that echolocation has some profound effects on the cells. We might even think of it as PEMF, right? Electromagnetic frequencies. And with all the discussion about the possible negative effects of too much 5G and all these other effects in our environment. Now we're doing something very biologically beneficial to the human physiology. So during that float, the dolphin is echolocating, the person is relaxing. There's a real connection. Even at one point, the client will put their hand out and put it right on the dolphin's heart. You can feel the dolphin's heartbeat. I mean, you think about putting your hand on another human being, your closest loved one's heart, your baby, your child, your spouse, right on their heart, and just feel that for a while and just settle into that in our busy day. That's a serious connection you make.
Deep, yeah.
So it's a really unique opportunity. This session, we actually had a hydrophone that we recorded every single sound the dolphins were making at every frequency, and we have spectrographs of that with each client. And we did, brain maps before and after. So we have a pretty good building body of evidence as to what these effects might be. And we're making correlations. Yeah. And so that's one activity. So the Brain Camp came out of this discussion and this opportunity that presented itself. Like many people have opportunities. We stepped into it, we developed it, we worked with it. And now we have people will come into town. We had a family come in from the West Coast, but the Northern California, this last camp. And we analyze their brain. What's their baseline? They can't grow to somewhere if they don't know where they're growing from.
Right.
Analyze where they are. Then we applied really specific therapy. So I design in those 3 days. It's a 3-day intensive program. You're twice a day you're on land. So it works like this. In the morning, you come into our brain lab.
Okay.
We set up a lab right there at the place. You're doing therapies that are designed for your imbalances, strengthening areas that we need. You do an hour's therapy, then you're in the water for an hour with the dolphins. Then you have lunch, then you repeat. An hour in the brain lab, an hour with the dolphins. And in the evening, we'll have different types of group events. My wife led a vision board this last time that was remarkable for all the attendees. And we have a presentation about the marine mammals another night with one of our specialists, which is really intriguing. So we spend that time really changing the way people's brains work, in a way starting this neuroplastic trajectory for people that can continue to be carried out. And actually today I'm looking at the maps of those people because we did it before and after. And I'm making correlations, and I've already been sending out follow-up exercises and recommendations for them to keep doing at home now. So they're back in their homes, but they're still following up with some of these exercises because it's a trajectory. I'm sure I couldn't get with you and spend an hour and my life is different. I need an ongoing repetition to alter the plastic response in my brain.
Yeah, as my listeners know, that 67 days is a neural network building period. So as much as we wish we could take the magic blue pill and make it all just, happen, the reality is those who get the best transformations, those who get the best developed brains in terms of what you're doing, are those who stay committed to the process and trust the process and stay in the zone of it. When you observed, okay, the scientist in me just wants to go deep, so I've got to pay attention to my listeners and make sure. But when you're observing these outcomes in that post float or that post water experience, are you seeing a brainwave shift? Because we do know, like, a lot of the disruptive patterns of anxiety and depression and those type of things really have a lot to do with the hardware of the brain waves and that being in dysfunction. So are you seeing a stabilizing and even maybe a passing into better levels of alpha brainwave state or those type of things?
So again, as you know, we're looking at every brainwave activity bandwidth. So we're looking at delta, theta, alpha, which is most people consider that's really crucial. But I would say it like this: they're all crucial when they're in the right zone. So most people have heard about alpha or delta because of sleep, but beta, so high beta, beta, different levels of alpha. Anyway, what I really noticed across the board this time was that coherence measures improved drastically. Wow. Coherence is one area of the brain talking to another area of the brain. Wow. So we have either hypercoherence, too much going on, hypocoherence, too little going on. And so I like the way one of my PhDs that I work with has explained this to me. He said, Mike, it's like having two close friends and they both live in the same town and they can talk to each other. But if they both live in the same room, that might be a little hypercoherent.
Yes.
And if one actually moves across the country, then they might have hypocoherence. Yeah. So although things don't move away in the brain, you can have signals that are racing and you can have signals that are really sluggish. And so we do know that coherence measures are one of the best metrics for a brain that's communicating healthfully. It's not racing away like someone who might have ADD or ADHD or OCD or anxiety. And it's not slugging along like someone who might have sensory processing disorder, Parkinson's, depression, or might be on that side. So we look at that coherence measure, and then I looked at all the power metrics, which are those bandwidths, and we saw substantial improvements. I did notice that in over everyone's limbic area, their emotional center, everyone was lit up by the end of the camp. So I always have to say, okay, that's not where we always want you, but it's an experience where you're so filled with joy from that being with the dolphins that we can see that area is very highly active.
And I got to imagine if you're measuring neurochemicals at all during that period, that the oxytocin is going nuts and all of the chemicals that are so protective of the brain and are in such deficit right now in our current environment. What has been the thing in your research that you're most proud of? And what's the thing in your research that you're just most excited about the potential for?
The thing I'm most proud of, well, the thing that really keeps me going, Doc, is this, the why. What's my why?
Yeah.
Why is, I feel a little, and I don't do that all the time, but I feel a little emotional about it. My why is that when you see people, let's say a college age person or a teenager, and they are being taken out by anxiety, by depression, suicidal thoughts, to bring them back from something like that, to give them a hope back, to give them a chance to turn when they're in that hopeless situation, that is something that I'm about. I'm about that. We had some military people here last week during the Super Bowl with canines, and we're actually going to have some military personnel, and I want to invite those who maybe have been in the military that are listening on your podcast to reach out to us, because we're putting together a camp specifically for former military veterans and all the issues that come with that. Because to bring this one gentleman we were working with and sharing with him, and I did a brief evaluation with him, but we were able to nail down something that he's suffering with, to bring him back from that, to turn that around for him, to give him back hope. That's why I do this. When you have someone with dementia, early dementia, and they're declining, and or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and we can give them a little more autonomy so they don't have to go into a home because their loved one can't do it anymore. That's why I do it. And when we have a little kid who drowned, near drowning, Florida has the highest amount of drownings in the nation because of the amount of pools and water and things. And when you can help a child regain some functionality to swallow, to move their limbs a little more under control with other wonderful therapists, that's why I do this. I'm really a clinician at heart. That's why I do it, because I like to see people saying, I'm back a little bit, even though we all have an ultimate end. If we can do that with people day in and day out, that's what I'm about. That's what I'm about in terms of my earthly work.
I love that so much. And we're driven very similarly. Both of us could be in a practice and doing the other things that our colleagues are doing, but we're doing the work of actually application into the population that's making the biggest impact in our lives. So I love that so much. So much cutting edge science is coming up that I think you're at the forefront of. I love that you mentioned things like anxiety, depression, ADD. A lot of entrepreneurs fall in that camp. We are a little bit differently wired in a sense. And your work with Parkinsons and seeing some shifts there, getting to watch some of the kids through that went through. Share a little bit about what you've seen there. There was one, I think it was a girl who stood out, and I don't know if it was Parkinson's or what she was suffering with, but I know she had a lot of physical movement, uncontrolled physical movement ahead of time, and how I watched it get stabilized. I don't know if that's what was happening, but I was just visibly seeing the difference as an aware observer. So I'm just curious, like some of those kids that have come through and how life becomes different because of that stabilization or that up leveling, as we were talking about.
Very interesting young lady, 18 years old now, was a premature birth. She's lived a relatively normal life in terms of cognitively, a little bit slower in processing, but very, very bright. But she had more of a motor component that was dysfunctional, was way behind. So she walked very late. She never crawled. And now she has developed something called POTS, P-O-T-S, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, very complicated name, but to put it really basically, it's someone when they're laying down or when they're sitting down, they stand up, their heart rate doesn't match, and so their heart races, they feel like they're going to pass out, their hands, extremities are very cold, sensory things in the environment can trigger them. It's a very debilitating condition, which then affects many other things, immune system, it affects joints, it can affect a lot of different tissues in the body. And so her movement pattern, so when we analyzed what was going on, even though we have all these excellent diagnoses, actually from some physicians at Stanford in your woods there, a little further north. Yes, it is diagnosed, but the question is, can we do something about it? Yes, that's it. So we consider ourselves functional neurologists, all my colleagues that have trained in this area, because we want to now take that and look at what can we do to improve or to reduce that condition neurologically so that she can have more function in her life. So she can go to college, so she can drive a car, so she's not stuck in the house all the time being triggered by every little thing. So the movement patterns we worked very diligently on, and we found, interestingly, maybe for some of those who have a little more knowledge, we found numerous primitive reflexes that were persisting in 18, which means neurologically she didn't have the best development when she was little, probably because she was premature. They were still there mildly. We mitigated those, we got rid of those, and immediately in 2 days she started to have responsiveness that her parents said, we haven't even seen this. Everywhere. So it's not that we're so remarkable, but sometimes when you look in the places where nobody looks, what's the quotes? One of my wife's favorite quotes from that movie about the gentleman who developed the computer.
Oh, goodness.
People you think the least about do the things that the most, something of that nature.
Something like that, yeah.
Sometimes you look in the smallest place that everyone else who's been an expert has not looked at, and there it is. It's just, that's the thing. And sometimes we can do that, and it's remarkable when we can find that. I feel like we're hitting a home run. I feel like we're helping the parents. The parents told us the most important thing we got here was not just how she's responded, but was that we understand more about what's really causing it now, not just the name, what's causing it. And I love being able to share that with them.
Yeah, that information. So this is more of that primal, startle, reflex, and those type of things that was lodged, like stuck almost in the body.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and that's going to be a huge finding as it continues to get researched, because so many theories out there right now, even with ADD and ADHD, is a little bit of connective to that, like that they didn't completely clear that limbic basal reflex beginning that we have for whatever reason, whether it be trauma or whatever. All right. So I want to bring this gorgeous conversation home to my entrepreneur that's listening, that's into this and saying, okay, how do I optimize? How do I start to get a baseline? How do I start to grow and strengthen so that I can continue to run my business and my company late into my 60s, 70s, and 80s? And then I'm actually doing more, not less, and not subscribing to this. I'm now a certain age, so now I just start my gentle decline to death, which I think is just ridiculously wrong, perpetuated in our culture, but I won't jump on that soapbox right now. But how can my listeners, if it's working for people with that kind of issue and you're seeing this shift in this movement through, what can they be doing? What kind of things are exciting for them in terms of optimization that they can be even doing now?
Well, that's a great way to kind of box that and categorize it. So let's do number one. Number one, if you were going to coach somebody, if I were going to coach somebody, I'd say, let me get a balance sheet of where you are right now. Let me get a profit and loss sheet. Let me find out what are your strengths and weaknesses. Let me find out what you want to go to in your fiscal numbers. Where do you want to go? Where are you now? And then we're going to figure that out. So we have got to get a baseline measurement on someone's brain. That's where we begin.
Yeah.
And we can find out how much performance we can improve that. So a quick story on that. Well, I'll finish the story. I'll finish with the story. So we got to get a baseline on them. So that's the important part. So whether you get that in California with some colleagues of mine there, which I will give you some names, or whether they come to Brain Camp, or they decide, hey, we want to meet with Dr. Bagnell. Actually, we'll be with a lot of entrepreneurs, people that are really highly focused at the biohacking conference, Dave Asprey's. At the end of the month, we'll be there.
Oh, great.
We'll be at the Braintap booth, and we'll be having things about dolphin camp. So they could definitely connect with us, not for an exam, but for questions and to meet us. And so that's going to be an interesting and exciting experience.
Yeah.
So when you get a baseline, then you know where you can go. And then we determine what are the performance metrics we want to improve upon. And in those, we start to develop particular and specific exercises, usually using things like the eyes or the body movements that are specific, again, because you can do things on your own and they may have some benefit, but it's much better when you can target things and throw hit the bullseye every time, or shoot at the bullseye at least. If you don't even have that, then you're kind of one step behind.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up Braintap. I'd love for you to share that relationship that you have there. And like, I love that you're coming to Dave's event. I think I'll be there. So I'm trying to rearrange my schedule to be there because that's one of my favorite things to go to. And, but I'd love for you to talk about that Braintap system and how you're connected to that and what your thoughts are there.
Dr. Porter and I are close colleagues. We've spoken on numerous panels around the country. And so we had several discussions afterwards where he was able to share with me the real science behind what he's doing. But basically, it is well known in the neurofeedback, neuroscience world that audio, visual, and entrainment can change the brain. We already know that. It even has that name, AV.
Yeah.
That's well known amongst us, maybe not so much. So some people would say sound and light therapy or binaural sounds, but we know that. So they put together a headset that you can put on and run through your app on your phone and run different types of programs that will alter brain functionality, help you to change the meta programs. We use the neurofeedback modules in there primarily because once I map out someone's brain, I can tell them we want to do the left hemisphere more activity, we want to do the right hemisphere. Yes. We want to do more sensory motor activity. So I can target it with them and make it very, very precise so their outcomes go even through the roof. We want more alpha training like some of our colleagues in coaching do and training people. So we can target it. So Braintap is a highly effective device, piece of technology device that's really low cost comparatively, that people run out of their own home multiple times a day to help sleep, attention, motivation, all these factors. So I highly recommend Braintap. They're one of our close colleagues. We're doing a conference actually in Paris in May for doctors and clinicians and therapists. So we have that going on in Paris in May. I can get you information.
Oh, yes, please do. Now I'm intrigued. So Dr. Porter is going to be on this series and the podcast, and Braintap is something I use every single day. I can see it, but I don't want to get up and grab it, but it's sitting right there. It's how I start my day. And here's what I love. And this is when you get people like Dr. Bagnell and I, Dr. Woods, Dr. Amen, Dr. Porter, that our whole aim is for this to become in the mainstream, for you to be able to actually get benefit from it. Right. We start working together in ways that makes it so much more, we become stronger together. And I love that, because in the academia communities, that is not necessarily the way that things run. But that's why I want to bring you these amazing people are literally at the forefront of these breakthroughs. What I love about what Dr. Bagnell says is when you know where you're starting from, when you get the baseline and you know this is where my brain, not every brain, but my brain starts, and there are multiple avenues. You wouldn't go and train just one avenue of your physical body, but yeah, in our brains we think, oh, I'll just pop a fish oil and that's good enough. Well, yes, it's helpful. And yes, so are a lot of nootropics and things like that Dr. Ben from Neurohacker, I'm sure we'll be talking about, that are cutting edge. Some aren't going to work at all. Some will work. So it depends on your particular brain. And that's what I love about Dr. Bagnell, is he's getting in and really seeing like what's happening for you, not everybody, but you compared to the mainstream. And I love that you've partnered with Dr. Porter to like work on specific areas for these individuals and be able to optimize those. So that's
There's another bonus about that. We're working on integrating some of the dolphin sounds that we picked up from the hydrophone into some of the Braintap programs. So that should be coming up in the next 6 months. I want to tell you a quick story, Doc, about an entrepreneur, a lady who is doing amazing things. She's highly energetic. She's well connected. She's just put together a book to help people come back from anxiety. She's a very sharp gal. She's been through our dolphin camp. But one of the things I would tell you is she was doing everything you could possibly do to improve brain function and activity. When we measured her brain, she said, I think what you're showing me is that I'm doing too much.
Yeah.
And I said, yes. So this is the important point about specificity. Sometimes you can throw the kitchen sink at your brain. I'm going to take all these supplements. I'm going to do all these sound and light therapies. I'm going to hit myself with this and A, B, C, D, and E. And then when you find out with a map, you say, I'm overdoing it? Oh, how could I possibly? They're all good things.
right.
Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So she actually has a large base of clients in Australia. So she would be up late. She said, no, I don't sleep. I stay up and then I sleep from 7 a.m. until noon. So, well, that's not enough sleep. I'm pretty much working sleep medicine with colleagues all the time. That's not going to really handle the proper, integration in your brain. So we actually got her by the second day of dolphin camp going to bed at 9 o'clock.
Oh my.
She was staying up till 7. So 2 days in therapy altered her sleep patterns like we had never seen before.
Wow.
So much healthier, so much healthier. So she still has her clients there. She just works out a different schedule with them.
I love it.
She's able to produce more in a healthy way. We don't want an entrepreneur to go and have such an incredible output and then burn out by the time they're 55 or 60. We want them to be ongoing, more efficiently producing, and enjoying the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, and it's something I see a lot when they come to me. They've usually hit that point of like, okay, I can't. There is that optimal point that we pass, and then we can no longer produce. We actually start reducing, right? We start regressing, and that's where my work kind of takes in, starts to remove some stories that are holding them back and that kind of thing. But they work together. Like you have to optimize from neuroplasticity, the thinking and the thoughts. But as you were talking at the top of the show, like if the hardware is not working in certain proper areas, then that has to get optimized too, so that you can really be the best version of you. And ultimately that's what we're after, right?
Yeah, 100% agree.
How can my listeners connect with the work that you're doing at the dolphin camps? How can they connect? I know you mentioned military personnel. I love that. How can they connect with you and start to dive deep into the work you're doing?
So we just opened up a Facebook page for Brain Camp with the Dolphins. You can go to Bagnell Brain Center on Facebook or on Instagram, Bagnell Brain Center, which you and I have conversed through there many times.
Yep.
Now there's a specific page on Facebook, so you can just go through our office page and you can find me, Dr. Michael Bagnell. And I always tell people the caveat is you're not going to see me doing yoga. You're going to learn about the brain.
That's right.
You might see a meal of mine because I'm going to tell you about why it's important for your brain, because I'm also with my wife. But generally, BagnellBrainCenter.com is our website. That's being retooled with some of our newest footage from the dolphin brain camps. And they can reach us through any of those social media areas. BagnellBrainCenter.com, Bagnell Brain Center, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
I love it. And we'll put all those links in the show notes to make it really, really simple for you. And then I really want to encourage my listeners to follow the journey when Dr. Bagnell and I decide that we get to go down to Florida and go through this process. The only reason why I'm showing this part of the journey for you is because probably Dr. Bagnell has a story too that got you started in this. For me, the story of me being in massive dysfunction and wondering why somebody else's brain was working better than mine, and then changing everything to learn why that is not the case. It's just the way it's wired. And that's why we get to do what we do with you today. And I love that Dr. Bagnell's work is really holistically bringing that picture together. And we're going to have a good time doing that together, and in the name of science, and then also in the name of helping you, our listeners, optimize the experience you have in this life while you're here on Earth. So Dr. Bagnell, thank you so much for being with me today.
So much fun. Great talking with you.
Absolutely.
All right, that's a wrap with Dr. Bagnell. Powerful, powerful work that he is doing and research that he is doing to truly help us understand how our brain functions in optimal states, how it functions in non-optimal states, and how we can start to tap into that training in order to up-level our own state of focus, our own state of practice, and our own state of up-leveling. And I would love for you to let me know how this episode impacted you. Over on socials, please tag me and Dr. Bagnell and let us know your big takeaway from today's episode. And I really love it when my listeners go in and give us a 5-star review. We always love to feature you there on Instagram and on Facebook, and just give you love for telling us through a review, a 5-star review, and writing what you're taking away from the podcast. So I would love it if you did that. I appreciate it so much. And I will see you on our next episode next week, where we're going to dive deeper into the brain science of success. All right, until next week, bye for now.